In today's video, I ditched the old round steering wheel of my Model Y and put in this beautiful yoke steering wheel. Come on with me as I walk you through how I did it. All right, so as you can see, the new steering wheel, it's literally just a shell, just a frame. So I'm gonna be pulling the airbags out. Then once I have this whole steering wheel out, you'll see I'll actually take the two controls that are here and they'll get reinstalled into the existing frame of our new yoke steering wheel. So the first thing is to remove this little airbag control right out of the center of your steering wheel. You're gonna need something with a similar description as this. I'm just using a little Allen wrench. It has to be firm enough where you can push in a pretty hard spring, but also small enough to fit in a small circle here on the side of the steering wheel. The unboxing is really simple because there's nothing to it. It's literally one piece. It's got a little bit of packaging around it, but that's it. Super simple. One thing that might be helpful to do first is to put your vehicle in service mode. Now you can do this without doing it. I've done it, but it leaves a little more of a risk of you doing something that could cause a problem. Let's put the car into service mode. You're going to find the little vehicle icon first. Once you click on that, you're going to look down to software. Once you select software, you're going to go up and you're going to hold the model of your car. So in this case, I'm going to hold Model Y, and eventually it's going to pop up like this. I don't know any kind of access code, so I'm typing in service. RVICE. And then OK. It's going to give you a little bit of warning. Make sure you're not doing something you shouldn't be doing, which you're not. Then you can actually enter service mode. And now you'll see everything's kind of engaged. It's locked out. Now I can start working on my steering wheel now that I'm in the service mode. So looking at your steering wheel, here on the side, this little hole is where you're going to access in with that Allen wrench to release the airbag. First, I'm going to pop out the passenger side, then I'll give you a double-angled view of popping out the driver's side, both the front and the side, how I clip out one end, and eventually the whole thing. Okay, so I like to think I made that easy, and I'll show you just a second what's actually happening behind the scenes, but they also kind of help you feel this out. I'll use like this phone as an example. So I have to push in totally sideways to this airbag, totally straight. But once I have this first set popped out a little bit, well now, to get the second side out, I can't push in straight anymore because the hole is slightly shifted, so I'll have to push out this. So this new one here, once it's shifted out like this, I'll have to angle the direction at which I'm putting it in slightly out like this. So instead of pushing in just like this from the side, I had to angle it slightly this way in the hole and then kind of push in a direction going this way to get it to release. So I'm really careful as I pull this airbag out because there's this little flexible plastic harness that's holding it in. It's pretty strong, you just don't want to make any sudden pulls. Okay, so as you pull this out, I'm going to be removing that little yellow clip right there, and I'm going to use some needle nose pliers to do that, but you can use anything that works for you. And I'm just using the needle nose here to pinch down the ends where they're meant for your fingers, but just a little bit easier to stick the tool in there rather than your hand. So now on that simple, I've got it pulled out. Now again, you could potentially use your fingers to pull this out, just my hands are a little bit big, so using the needle nose really just kind of grips in here on these little clips and makes it really easy to pull out. And once you pull this airbag out, you are going to get a warning on the screen that says safety restraint system issue. That's totally normal. And then now I have to pull out the electrical of the steering wheel. Again, I'm going to use the same little needle nose to pull out that clip. Again, just pulling down the outsides of that clip, just put a little bit of pressure in order to pull it out. Once you unhook the electrical portion of it with a little maroon clip, you're going to get another error on your screen and that your horn's unavailable. Again, totally normal. My next step is I have one really large bolt that's right down the center of the steering wheel, and it's really the only thing left holding this steering wheel onto the column itself. Now I'm going to take this out with a giant socket wrench. It's going to be a T55, or you can use a correlating Allen wrench. But I'm going to tell you, it is tight. These ones I've done in the past are very tight, which you would expect it to be because it's holding your steering wheel onto your car. So I'll use a socket like this. It works for me, but it will take some muscle. And when I say take some muscle, it takes a lot of muscle. This is very, very tight. I had to try a couple different angles before I finally cracked it open. Once you get it to crack open, that initial just 1/16 of an inch turn, then it unscrews just fine. There's your bolt, and then you just pull it straight off. There she is. So while I have these two out, just a quick comparison. So left to right, they're almost nearly the same side at the handles. So where this handle extends and where this handle extends about the same. You're just gonna have just what you would think, a little bit more extra here on the bottom. On the back side, you can see just where that corner is gonna stick down just a little bit farther on each side. And of course, you got the open part on the top now. Now there's about 4 or 5 screws I had to take off the back of the steering wheel. It just kind of takes the plastic housing and separates it from the steel of the actual frame. Then I pried off this little piece of plastic on the bottom, just the little trim tool, and 4 more screws taking out to where this little piece of plastic came off the front. Now I'm going to back out each of these 3 large screws, which are really going to hold all of like the electrical housing to the frame. And I'm going to do that with a T30 Torx bit. Now, while these are not as tight as that main nut that was down the center of the steering column, these are still in there pretty good, but once you crack them loose, they'll just back out pretty simply, but they do have a long thread, so it takes quite a bit of turns. Then I'm just disconnecting this little ground screw that's onto the electrical of the steering wheel. A couple more little screws to pull out before I start prying off the face plates, which just pry off with this little orange trim tool I have on each side. They just kind of snap into place and snap off just the same. So now I think I'm going to try to remove this housing here in the back, which again, if I remember right, is just snapped into place. So I take that same little trim tool and I just pry this little plastic off all the way around. Start with the top. Now the top seemed a little bit more delicate, but once I got that out, it was a little more of a physical, just prying it open from all the way around. And it kind of hooks around the plastic at several different spots. And then this little blue clasp here was actually clipped to the housing as well. So it's just a little tedious, but slow and gently because I don't want to break anything because I am reusing all this black housing on the new yoke wheel. So carefully, quietly got it all separated. Then I had just this little wire left. Now that I have that cover off, I have 2 more screws exposed. I'll need to take these out in order to get the controls out. And these I'm going to use a T10 screw. Again, you could use a correlating Allen wrench. The Allen wrench, to be honest, probably works better, but the Torx works better for me just because it's something I'd have in my common drill kit. Each of these controls has 3 separate screws going down through the frame into the actual housing itself. Once those are all out, I remove that little silver piece of trim, and then you can kind of see that each of the controls will kind of pull separately, and now they're just held on by some wires. This one last little connection here, I use my pocket knife to kind of pry this apart. And then it's just a matter of removing the little ground screw that's still in there, and then I can pop loose these little rivets, plastic kind of holding the wires in from the backside. Okay, so now I have everything, including this little wire harness, separated from the old round wheel. I'm going to install it into the yoke wheel. So I didn't know at first, but I actually end up redoing this step. But I went ahead and put these each back into their place, little controls. Now they have 3 screws, of course, going down through the frame, fastening them back to this yoke frame, just like before. Once I got these all in, again, 3 on each side, then I moved on to those large 3 Torx head bits with the really long threads and put each of those back in. And these kind of hold the little horn housing with all the electric hooks. This hooks this back down into the yoke itself. Then it was a matter of just refitting the plastic housing all the way around. This kind of like clips into itself, which makes it a little bit tricky. You have to line it all up just right. And I had a little problem doing that. And I come to find out, I needed to actually fit this little silver piece of plastic up over the lip of this little control. I'm not even really sure how I got it out without doing this in the first place. So this meant going back a couple steps. So I backed out each of those screws, pulled it out. You can see there that little plastic's going to fit right over the little, there's a little nub in that little control. So once I have those hooked in right, then I went ahead and screwed these controls back into place. Again, 3 screws on the back of each, then 1 down into the tops. Once I got those all in, then it was smooth sailing, as again, there's the one there on the top. Then back to the part I already did is fitting all this housing back together. Again, it's a little tricky, but managed to get it eventually. That eventually led me to the hardest part of this whole project, which is getting this little cord. Now, this little cord is what's going to make the heat in your steering wheel work. I tried a bunch of different ways, weaving this in this little bottom U section, tried to put the cover on. Every time I tried it, didn't work. The cord was pushed out hard to the right, so I felt like I had to do that, and I did, and I couldn't remember from the disassembly which way it went. So eventually, after trying a bunch of different ways, I realized it had to go to the right, and I could tuck it into place you see here, and eventually it ran up the right side and back across the middle to where it eventually hooked up to the left. Again, this was definitely the most tricky part of this whole install because that wire is very stiff because it's a heating element. So once I got it into place, I carefully put these screws back in one by one, making sure I was in no way, shape, or form pinching that wire. It did take, several minutes, probably 15 minutes to go through this process of putting these screws in. Once it was all set, then I went ahead and put these 4 or 5 screws back into the back of the wheel, screwing the plastic housing to the actual steel of the frame. You do want to get these flush so it doesn't rub on the actual column later on, then snap this little plastic, cosmetic housing back into place. Then really all that was left is to snap these 2 little plastic covers back on. They do snap into place pretty nice, and they should still toggle back and forth. These seemed a little bit stiffer than before for whatever reason, but I tried them a couple different ways, but this was definitely all you had to do. All right, now the only thing left to do is to put it back on. Now, if you notice, my wheels turn just so slightly counterclockwise. You're going to put it on at the exact same angle. Now, these 2 have to fit into the steering wheel, so you can't be way far off. I'll just line this up. And kind of just rotate back and forth. Once it's in the right spot, you just kind of push on. until it's back into place. And before we put the airbag in, don't forget to put this screw back down the middle. And it will be important that you get this pretty tight because it's literally the only thing holding your steering wheel onto the column. I use the same manual socket wrench to put this back on, again getting it really tight, but I could have used an impact wrench, but this worked just the same. And once I got that, plug this last little electronics back in. Now the very last thing to do is put the airbag back in, making sure you're plugging in this cord first, but again, be careful because you do have a little flexible piece of plastic harness. And it clicks. Just gonna set it back into place. You'll hear 2 definite clicks once it's back into place where it should be. And we're in. All that's left there is to take it back out of service mode. That same little car icon brings it up and you can just click exit service mode. Then I just played around with the screen a little bit just to make sure everything was still functioning, close the door, but that little red border is gone, which means we're out of that mode. Okay, so now that it's on, let's talk about what's it like driving with it. So to be honest with you here, I've been doing it for about an hour now. I don't notice a big difference from the old steering wheel. Now, if you were somebody who liked to drive with their hand on top, obviously you can't do that because there's nothing there. That's the whole point of the yoke. But as far as just turning, steering, everything else is pretty normal. The comfort of it. So if you'll notice, you do have this little ridge here on both sides, but this kind of gives it that airplane cockpit feel. Most of the time, I feel like I drive just like this, especially when I'm driving maybe a little more aggressive. But also I found myself putting like a single finger, sometimes a double, or even maybe 3 fingers as I'm just kind of relaxing through. But that little ridge makes it way more comfortable than what you're expecting. And then here I'm gonna make a complete circle, an actual 360-degree turn. Again, just like before, nothing too crazy, nothing out of the ordinary, just hand over hand. That's the same style you've always driven with. Okay, to answer one question for you before you get to it that you might have, a question I hadn't really thought about until now that I've jumped into it, is how do the buttons all work? So most of them work really good. In fact, they all work just fine, but I've noticed I have to press the windshield wiper button just a little bit harder than I normally would. It's not quite as sensitive as, say, the light button. As you can see, like, my light's coming on just fine. The window wiper button does work. I just have to press it a little bit harder. So you notice there, it does work. I just got to push it a little bit harder. I don't quite hear that click like I did before. Whereas on this side, the voice activation works. Turn on defogging. So obviously that still works just fine. But the camera button here, again, works. I just have to press a little bit harder. And again, you notice it will come up and go off. And as well as the round buttons, those still seem to work just fine. So if I want to activate full self-driving here, it clicks on just like normal. And I can still swish back and forth between the hurry and the standard modes. And visually, I just love the way this wheel looks spinning around during its full self-driving. Pretty cool. And here I'll just show you, I'm just going to back into like this particular spot in my driveway, this little 5-point turn. So it's actually maybe easier to grab in and out with its little flexibility, and without that top, it doesn't hit you in the full self-driving. Really just works really well. Now the finish I have on my yoke is the matte carbon fiber. They also make it in like a gloss carbon fiber, but in addition, they make it in 2 different shades of black and a white. So no matter what interior you're going after, they have something that'll probably fit your style. I got the carbon fiber because it matches my little curtain shield in the back, which I also got from Tesstudio, and I plan on putting a ton of other carbon fiber here on the Juniper, so make sure you subscribe, see what else I can do with just the carbon fiber alone. Thanks for watching as always. See you on the next one.